Captain Jake Morrison walked through the long metal corridors of Nexus Prime, the biggest space station in the galaxy. His boots made soft sounds on the floor as he moved toward the main meeting hall. Behind him walked Lisa Carter, a smart woman who handled all the talking between different alien races. Next to her was Ryan Phillips, a man who knew everything about fighting wars and planning battles. Jake felt nervous as they got closer to the big doors of the council room. Inside that room sat representatives from dozens of alien species, all much older and more advanced than humans. Some had been traveling between stars for millions of years, while humans had only learned to leave Earth a few hundred years ago. The doors opened with a soft hiss and Jake stepped inside. The room was huge, with seats arranged in circles that went up toward the ceiling like a giant bowl. Strange sounds filled the air as different aliens talked in their own languages. Some made clicking noises like insects, others hummed like machines, and a few made sounds that humans could not even describe. Jake walked to the center of the room where a small platform waited for speakers. All around him, alien eyes watched his every move. Some were huge and black, others glowed with their own light, and some looked like jewels that sparkled in the dim lighting. The reason for this emergency meeting was scary enough to bring all these different species together. Something called the Void Swarm had appeared at the edge of the galaxy and was eating entire star systems. Nobody knew what it was or where it came from, but it was moving toward the center of the galaxy where most civilizations lived. Ambassador Vex Thule of the Krathari Empire stood up from his seat. He was tall as two humans and had 4 arms covered in metal-like skin that reflected the lights in the room. When he looked down at Jake, his face showed nothing but contempt. "The baby species wants to speak," Vex Thule said, his voice sounding like metal scraping against metal. How amusing that creatures who still fight over water and dirt on their tiny world think they can help us. Laughter filled the room, but it was not the kind of laughter Jake knew. The Krathari made sounds like grinding gears, while the crystal beings called Zephyrians created musical notes that somehow managed to sound mocking. Even the slug-like Gorvani shook with what could only be amusement. Jake kept his face calm even though anger burned in his chest. "We may be young compared to your civilizations, but humans have learned a lot about survival. We have fought many wars and learned how to win against enemies who were stronger than us." This made the laughter even louder. Harmonic 7, a being made of living crystal who spoke for the Zephyrians, rang with tones that the translation device turned into words. "These mammals still kill each other for pieces of land that are smaller than our smallest mining operations. They have weapons that can barely damage a single asteroid, while we have ships that can break planets." A representative of the water-dwelling titles bubbled up from her tank, making sounds that translated as scornful amusement. "Humans have been in space for such a short time that their oldest space stations are younger than our newest recruits. What could they possibly teach civilizations that have been perfecting warfare since before their son was born?" Jake looked around the room at all the different species. He saw beings of pure energy that flickered like flames, insect-like creatures with hundreds of eyes, and things that looked like living rocks. All of them were laughing at humanity in their own ways. "We know we are new to this galaxy," Jake said, his voice steady and strong. "We know our ships are small and our weapons are simple compared to yours, but we have something that might be useful against this void swarm." "And what is that?" asked a being that looked like a walking tree, with glowing bark. "We know how to change quickly when things go wrong," Jake replied. "Human armies have won battles by adapting faster than their enemies expected. We do not have 1,000-year-old battle plans that we follow no matter what happens." The laughter became even more intense. Vex Thule's 4 arms gestured dismissively as he spoke to the entire assembly. "Listen to this primitive creature. They think that chaos and confusion are virtues in warfare. They do not understand that proper military doctrine requires centuries of refinement and testing. An energy being called Lumina 3 flickered in patterns that meant disdain. Humans change their tactics because they are too young to have developed proper ones. This is not wisdom. It is inexperience dressed up as strategy." The vote came quickly after that. Every single alien species agreed that humans should stay far away from the real fighting. They would be allowed to protect their tiny cluster of 12 colony worlds, while the advanced civilizations handled the serious threat of the Void Swarm. Jake and his team left the council chambers in silence. The corridor seemed longer on the way back to their ship, and the alien sounds from other parts of the station felt more hostile than before. Other species they passed looked at them with expressions that clearly said they thought humans were foolish children playing at being adults. When they reached their ship, the UES Defiance, Jake stopped at the loading ramp and looked back at the massive station. Nexus Prime stretched for kilometers in every direction, its surface covered with docking bays that held ships bigger than Earth's largest cities. "Captain," Lisa said quietly, "they have technology we can barely understand. Their smallest warships have more firepower than our entire fleet combined. Maybe they are right to handle this themselves." Ryan Phillips checked his electronic pad, where he had recorded everything about the alien fleets. "Their ships are impressive," he agreed. "But did you notice something about how they talked about fighting the Void Swarm?" "What do you mean?" Jake asked. Every single species mentioned their traditional tactics, their ancient strategies, their time-tested methods. They all plan to fight this new enemy the same way they have fought every enemy for thousands of years. Lisa looked confused. "Is that bad?" Ryan smiled, but it was not a happy smile. "It might be. Because from what we know about the Void Swarm, it learns from every battle and adapts to whatever weapons are used against it. If that is true, then using the same old tactics might be the worst possible approach." Jake nodded slowly as he understood what Ryan was suggesting. "You think their experience might actually work against them?" "I think," Ryan said as they walked up the ramp into their ship, "that being young and inexperienced might turn out to be an advantage for once." The doors of the UES Defiance closed behind them with a solid thunk. In a few hours they would leave Nexus Prime and return to human space, officially dismissed from participating in the galaxy's greatest military campaign. But as Jake settled into his captain's chair and gave the order to prepare for departure, he could not shake the feeling that the aliens had made a terrible mistake, not in dismissing humanity, but in thinking that the way they had always done things would be enough to stop something completely new and different. The Void Swarm was coming, and the galaxy's most advanced civilizations were about to discover that sometimes experience could be a weakness rather than a strength. The final confrontation began when the main Void Swarm force emerged from hyperspace at the edge of the Sol system, and every surviving alien civilization in the galaxy held its breath. What appeared before humanity was something beyond their worst nightmares. A bioconstruct the size of a small moon, surrounded by thousands of adaptive vessels that had learned from consuming 12 star systems and countless alien fleets. The entity pulsed with a sickly bioluminescent glow, its surface covered in writhing tissue that constantly shifted and changed. Sensor readings showed it contained the absorbed knowledge and adaptive capabilities of every civilization it had devoured, making it potentially the most dangerous opponent any species had ever faced. The remaining alien governments sent their final messages to Earth with a mixture of gratitude and resignation. The Krethari transmission came from Vexthol himself, the same ambassador who had mocked humanity at Nexus Prime months earlier. "Humans," his mechanical voice carried tones of respect that had been absent before. "Your courage has been remarkable, but this enemy has grown beyond what any single species can face. You have given the galaxy hope, but now you must save what you can and retreat." Similar messages arrived from the Zephyrians, the Titles, and every other surviving civilization. They had all pulled their remaining forces back to their core worlds, abandoning the Outer Rim to save their homelands. The universal message was clear: run while you still can. President Amanda Cross stood in the rebuilt war room beneath Washington, surrounded by her military advisors and looking at tactical displays that showed the approaching doom. The massive void entity was already demonstrating capabilities beyond anything they had encountered before, bending space around itself and generating energy fields that disrupted sensors from light years away. "Options?" she asked, though everyone in the room knew the situation looked hopeless. Admiral Susan Wright stepped forward with reports from the fleet commanders. "Captain Morrison has assembled 200 ships, all volunteers from across human space. Chief Engineer Santos has equipped them with every experimental weapon and defensive system we have developed. But against something that size, she did not need to finish the sentence. Everyone understood that 200 small ships, even with all of humanity's innovations, seemed insignificant against an enemy that had consumed civilizations with millions of vessels. Dr. Alex Parker, who had spent months studying void adaptation patterns, provided the scientific assessment that confirmed their fears. This entity contains the adaptive knowledge of dozens of species. It has encountered every type of weapon, every form of tactics, every strategic approach known to galactic civilization. General Pete Collins looked at the holographic display showing the approaching threat. So it knows everything we might try. Not everything, Ryan Phillips said quietly from his position near the communication array. He had been monitoring transmissions from the approaching enemy, analyzing the patterns for any useful intelligence. It knows everything the aliens tried, but they all fought the same way. President Cross turned to face him. Explain. Phillips brought up his analysis on the main screen. Every alien species we have studied follows similar military doctrines. Formal battle formations, standardized weapon systems, predictable tactical progression. The Void Swarm has learned to counter all of these approaches because they are fundamentally similar. But humans fight differently, Lisa Carter added, understanding where Ryan's analysis was leading. She had been promoted to overall tactical coordinator, and now wore the insignia of a full commander. We developed our military doctrine in isolation, without influence from galactic civilization. Jake Morrison's voice came through the communication system from his flagship, now designated UES Defiance II after his original ship had been destroyed in a heroic rearguard action. Madam President, we are ready to implement the final protocol. The final protocol was something that no military academy in the galaxy could have taught, because it violated every principle of organized warfare. Instead of attacking with a coordinated battle plan, humanity's last fleet would approach the Void entity using 200 completely different tactical methods. Some ships would ram with mining equipment, others would deploy gravitational anomalies, still others would use modified agricultural systems to spray clouds of metallic particles. A few crews had improvised entirely new attacks using whatever equipment they happened to have aboard their vessels. The strategy was chaos elevated to an art form, and it was based on the one advantage humanity had discovered over their months of fighting. Pure, unpredictable creativity. Maria Santos, now serving as fleet engineer aboard one of the attack vessels, had equipped every ship with completely different weapon systems. No two ships in our fleet use the same approach, she reported to Admiral Wright. If the Void entity tries to adapt to our attacks, it will have to develop 200 different defensive measures simultaneously. The attack began with Captain Morrison's simple broadcast to his volunteer fleet. Remember, we are not following any plan because we do not have a plan. Use whatever works, change whatever does not work, and never do the same thing twice. What followed was unlike any battle in galactic history. The human fleet approached the massive Void entity from every possible angle, using tactics that ranged from ancient ramming maneuvers to improvised weapons that were being invented during the battle itself. Lieutenant Amy Foster, now commanding her third ship after losing two others in previous engagements, flew directly at the entity's surface and deployed every mining tool she carried at maximum power. Her attack created a small wound in the creature's hull, but more importantly, it forced the entity to begin adapting to mining equipment. Before that adaptation could complete, Commander Rachel Brown arrived from a different angle and attacked, using modified waste disposal systems loaded with corrosive chemicals. The entity began developing chemical resistance, but then faced attacks from electromagnetic pulse weapons, gravity manipulators, and improvised explosive devices all at the same time. The Void entity's adaptive systems evolved to counter systematic threats. Encountered something they could not process. 200 simultaneous problems that had no common solution. Every time it adapted to one type of attack, 30 others continued causing damage. The battle lasted for 6 hours of continuous chaos. Human ships were destroyed, rebuilt from salvaged parts, and thrown back into combat using completely new configurations. Crews abandoned their damaged vessels and transferred to other ships, bringing their experience and improvised weapons with them. The breakthrough came when Chief Engineer Santos, commanding a converted cargo hauler loaded with gravitational mining equipment, realized that the Void Entity's core was trying to coordinate adaptations to all the different human attacks simultaneously. "It is like a computer trying to run too many programs at once," she reported to Morrison during the battle. "If we overload its processing capacity, we might be able to cause a system crash." Santos flew her ship directly into the creature's core structure and deployed every gravitational manipulation tool she carried at maximum power. The localized space-time distortion that resulted caused the entity's adaptive systems to feed back on themselves. The massive bioconstruct, unable to process the contradictory adaptation requirements, began to collapse inward. Its death throes destroyed most of the surrounding void ships, creating a chain reaction that eliminated the entire swarm force. When the battle ended, humanity had lost 60 ships and nearly 800 crew members, but they had accomplished something that the galaxy's most advanced civilizations could not. They had completely destroyed the void swarm. In the aftermath, as rescue ships searched the debris field for survivors, messages began arriving from every corner of the galaxy. The species that had laughed at humanity's offer of help now sent desperate pleas for assistance in rebuilding their shattered worlds. President Cross addressed the galaxy from the chambers of the United Nations, her words broadcast to every surviving civilization. "Humanity offers friendship and aid to all species who need it. We ask only that you remember this lesson. Never dismiss what people can accomplish when they refuse to accept defeat." The war was over, but its impact on galactic civilization would last for thousands of years. Military academies across the galaxy began studying human tactics, trying to understand how creativity and adaptability had triumphed over ancient experience and superior technology. Captain Morrison, promoted to admiral and now serving as humanity's representative to the reformed Galactic Council, found himself addressing the same assembly hall where he had been mocked months earlier. The alien representatives who remained listened with respectful attention as he spoke. "The Void Swarm was defeated not by superior weapons or ancient wisdom," he told the gathered species, "but by our willingness to try new approaches when old ones failed. We won because we were too young to know that our tactics were impossible." The galaxy had learned a hard lesson about the value of youth, creativity, and the refusal to accept conventional limitations. The species that had laughed at humanity's inexperience now understood that sometimes being new to the galaxy was exactly what the situation required. The Battle of Titan VII began in complete silence, which was the first sign that this would be unlike any space battle in galactic history. Captain Morrison's small fleet of 20 Harrier-class vessels approached the Void Swarm scouts using a tactic that no alien military had attempted in over 1,000 years. They turned off all their engines, all their weapons, and all their communication systems, then drifted in like dead debris floating among the asteroids. The Void Scouts, 5 bioships each roughly the size of a human destroyer, had sensors evolved from consuming hundreds of alien fleets. These sensors were perfectly designed to detect the energy signatures of active warships, but they completely missed the human vessels drifting silently toward them. Lieutenant Amy Foster sat in the pilot seat of the UES Hornet, watching her instruments count down the distance to the nearest void creature. Her ship was only 50 meters away when she finally ignited her engines and began the most unconventional attack in military history. Instead of firing weapons, Amy pointed her ship directly at the bio-vessel and activated the mining drill mounted on her bow. The massive cutting tool designed to bore through asteroid rock spun up to full speed as she rammed her ship into the creature's hull. The void vessel's adaptive tissue had evolved to absorb energy weapons and deflect projectiles, but it had no defense prepared for a physical mining tool. The drill bit deep into the creature's core, tearing through biological systems that had never encountered this type of attack. Amy triggered the improvised explosive device she had rigged to her ship's power core, then ejected in an escape pod just before the blast. The explosion was not powerful enough to destroy the bioship, but it damaged systems that the swarm had never needed to protect before. More importantly, it forced the void creature to begin adapting to a completely new threat, which was exactly what Ryan Phillips had been waiting for. From the bridge of the UES Defiance, he monitored the adaptation patterns with growing excitement. Hull thickening detected, Ryan reported to Captain Morrison. The creature is growing anti-ramming spines and reinforcing its outer shell. Adaptation time 4 minutes and 30 seconds. Perfect, Morrison replied. That gives us plenty of time for Phase 2. Lisa signaled the fleet. Phase 2 involved something the Void Swarm had never experienced in all its battles with alien civilizations. The remaining 18 human ships suddenly switched from ramming attacks to deploying modified cargo nets loaded with gravitational anomaly generators. The nets had originally been designed for asteroid capture, but Maria Santos had modified them to carry devices that could create localized gravity fields. When the nets wrapped around the bioships, the gravity generators activated and began pulling the creatures in different directions at once. The void vessels found themselves trapped, just as they finished adapting to ramming attacks. Their new, anti-ramming defenses were useless against nets that did not actually ram anything. They had to begin an entirely new adaptation cycle to deal with gravitational manipulation. Adaptation time increasing. Phillips reported with growing excitement. 6 minutes and 40 seconds for gravity resistance. They are having trouble keeping up with our changes. Before the bioships could complete their gravitational adaptation, the human fleet switched tactics again. This time they used coordinated electromagnetic pulse bursts generated by modified mining equipment. The EMP attacks disrupted the creatures' nervous systems just as they were developing gravity resistance. The battle became a deadly dance where the Void Swarm was always one step behind the human forces. Every time the bioships adapted to one type of attack, the humans had already moved on to something completely different. Lieutenant Commander Rachel Brown, commanding the UES Swift, delivered what would become known as the killing blow. She used her ship's waste disposal system to launch a cloud of metallic debris that clogged the breathing pores the creatures had developed to filter out gravitational effects. With their adaptive systems overwhelmed and their basic life functions disrupted, the bioships were finally vulnerable to concentrated plasma cutter fire. The mining tools that had been dismissed as primitive by alien civilizations proved devastating against creatures that had not had time to adapt to them. When the engagement ended, 47 minutes later, all 5 Void Scouts had been destroyed. Human casualties were 0, and the only equipment lost was mining tools and improvised explosives worth about 30,000 credits total. The victory sent shockwaves throughout the galaxy, but not in the way humanity had expected. Instead of celebration, the news was met with disbelief and desperate analysis by the surviving alien civilizations. On the crystal homeworld of Zephyros Prime, Harmonix. 7 resonated with tones of amazed confusion as he studied the battle recordings. They changed their attack method 7 times in less than 1 standard time unit, he reported to the Emergency Defense Council. Our military doctrine requires a full planning cycle to implement even minor tactical adjustments. The Krathari response was even more dramatic. What remained of their military leadership gathered in the war chambers of their fortress world to analyze footage that challenged everything they understood about proper warfare. The humans used mining equipment as weapons, General Korthval announced to the assembled officers. They deployed garbage as tactical munitions. They coordinated 17 different attack vectors without any apparent overall strategy. But it was Dr. Keth Ra, the Krathari xenopsychologist who had studied humans during First Contact, who provided the explanation that stunned the galactic military establishment. Humans possess what they call creativity to a degree that we have never encountered, she explained through mechanical translation. Where we perfect optimal solutions over thousands of years, they generate new approaches within minutes. Where we maintain successful techniques indefinitely, they constantly seek improvement and variation. The real shock came when Captain Morrison's fleet did not return to base to celebrate their victory. Instead, they immediately attacked another group of Void Scouts 2 days later, using completely different tactics based on what they had learned from the first battle. This second engagement lasted only 18 minutes. The human forces had analyzed the swarm's adaptation patterns and developed countermeasures that stayed ahead of the creature's learning curve. A week later, Morrison's group engaged their third void formation and destroyed it in 12 minutes. By their fourth encounter, the battle was over in less than 6 minutes. The pattern became clear to alien observers who had survived the initial swarm attacks. Humans were not just adapting during individual battles. They were adapting between battles, sharing information across their entire military structure in real time. Admiral Susan Wright coordinated the expanding human campaign from Earth's orbital command center, implementing a strategy that would have been impossible for any other species. She ordered complete tactical doctrine evolution every 72 hours, treating the war against the Void Swarm like a massive research project. Every engagement is a test, she explained to President Cross during a strategy briefing. Every victory teaches us something new about how these creatures think and adapt. Every loss makes our next attack more effective. The human fleet grew not through massive shipbuilding programs, but through rapid iteration and improvement. Chief Engineer Santos's shipyards were now producing Mark VII Harrier vessels that looked nothing like the original designs, incorporating lessons learned from dozens of successful engagements. But the real breakthrough came when Dr. Parker made a crucial observation about Void Swarm behavior. They are not just adapting to our weapons, he announced during an emergency strategy meeting. They are trying to predict and counter our adaptation patterns, but human creativity does not follow predictable patterns. This insight led to the development of what military historians would later call the jazz protocol. Like jazz musicians improvising together, human ship commanders were given broad objectives but complete freedom in execution, leading to battles that resembled artistic performances more than traditional military engagements. As news of humanity's continued victories spread throughout the galaxy, the same alien species who had laughed at them months earlier began sending desperate messages asking for help and advice. The young species that had been dismissed as primitive was now the only force successfully fighting the greatest threat the galaxy had ever known. 3 months passed after the meeting at Nexus Prime, and the news from the galaxy was getting worse every day. The Void Swarm had moved faster than anyone expected, and the mighty alien fleets that had laughed at human offers of help were being destroyed one after another. The first to fall were the Krithari, whose empire had ruled 1,000 star systems for over 50,000 years. Their massive warships, each one bigger than a human city, met the Void Swarm at a place called the Kepler Binary System. The battle lasted only 6 hours, but those 6 hours changed everything the galaxy thought it knew about warfare. Admiral Kexthul, brother of the ambassador who had mocked Jake Morrison, commanded the Krithari Grand Fleet from his flagship Eternal Dominance. The ship was 20 kilometers long and carried weapons that could melt entire moons. Around it flew 3,000 other Krithari vessels, all painted in the traditional red and gold colors of their empire. When the Void Swarm appeared, it looked nothing like the metal ships the Krithari were used to fighting. Instead of clean lines and obvious weapons, the enemy vessels appeared to be alive. They pulsed like giant hearts, their surfaces covered in what looked like skin that shifted and changed as the Krithari watched. Kexthul ordered his fleet to attack using Formation 7, a battle arrangement that had never failed in 3,000 years of Krithari warfare. His plasma cannons, each one capable of destroying an asteroid, fired in perfect coordination. The beams of superheated gas struck the void creatures directly, and for a moment, it looked like the battle would be another easy Krithari victory. But then something impossible happened. The burned areas on the creature ships began to heal, and worse than that, they began to change. The new tissue that grew where the plasma had struck became reflective, bouncing the energy beams back toward the Krithari fleet. Within minutes, the void ships had adapted to make the Krithari's most powerful weapons useless. The Zephyrians watched the Krithari defeat from their crystal ships hidden in the asteroid belt nearby. Harmonix 7, the same being who had dismissed humanity months before, resonated with tones of growing worry as he saw the enemy adapt so quickly. When the Zephyrians entered the battle, they tried their own ancient tactics. Their crystal matrix ships created harmonic frequencies that could shake apart enemy vessels from the inside. The sound waves they produced had never failed to destroy any ship they had encountered in 50,000 years of warfare. But the void creatures absorbed the harmonic attacks just like they had absorbed the plasma. Their tissue changed again, becoming tuned to cancel out the Zephyrian frequencies. Soon the crystal ships found their own weapons turned against them, their hulls cracking from harmonic feedback. On Earth, President Amanda Cross stood in the war room deep beneath the White House, watching the battle reports come in through the quantum communication array. Around her stood the best military minds humanity had ever produced, all of them studying the footage from the alien defeats. General Pete Collins, a man who had spent 40 years learning how to fight wars, pointed at the main screen where the destruction of the Krathari fleet played in slow motion. "Look at the timestamps," he said. "The void creatures took 8 hours to fully adapt to the plasma cannons, but only 4 hours to counter the Zephyrian harmonics." Admiral Susan Wright, commander of all human space forces, leaned forward to get a better look. "It is learning from each encounter. Every battle makes it stronger and faster at adapting to new weapons." Dr. Alex Parker, who studied alien life forms but had also served as a military strategist, pulled up more detailed analysis on his computer. "The really scary part is how the alien fleets responded to the adaptation. The Krathari kept using the same tactics for hours after their weapons stopped working. The Zephyrians took even longer to try something different." "Why would they do that?" President Cross asked. "Because that is how they have always fought," Dr. Parker explained. "When you have been using the same successful tactics for thousands of years, it becomes almost impossible to change quickly." Their experience became a trap. A communication signal came through from the outer colonies, and Captain Jake Morrison's face appeared on the main screen. He looked tired but alert, standing on the bridge of his ship somewhere near the frontier. "Madam President," Jake said, "I am sending you the latest intelligence from Outpost 7. The Void Swarm has broken through all the alien defensive lines. Current analysis suggests they will reach human space in 6 weeks, maybe less." The room became very quiet. Everyone knew what that meant. Humanity's 12 colony worlds, home to almost 2 billion people, were directly in the path of something that had just destroyed civilizations with millions of years of military experience. "What about evacuation support from the Galactic Council?" Admiral Wright asked. Jake's expression became grim. "The surviving alien fleets are pulling back to defend their core worlds. They have declared the Outer Rim systems expendable. That includes all human colonies." General Collins slammed his fist on the table. "The same species that laughed at our offer to help are now abandoning us to save themselves." "It gets worse," Jake continued. "The titles have closed their borders completely. The remaining Krathari ships are forming a defensive line around their home system. Even the Zephyrians are only protecting their crystal worlds now." President Cross felt the weight of 2 billion human lives pressing down on her shoulders. "Captain Morrison, what is your assessment of our defensive capabilities?" "Honestly, Madam President, if we try to fight the Void Swarm the way the aliens did, we will last about 15 minutes. Our biggest ships are toys compared to what just got destroyed." The President looked around the room at her advisors. "Options." Dr. Parker was the first to speak. "We could try to evacuate as many people as possible back to Earth and the inner colonies." "Not enough ships or time," Admiral Wright said immediately. "We would save maybe 10% of the population." General Collins stood up and walked to the tactical display. "There might be another way, something the aliens never considered because they were too proud to try it." "Explain." Collins highlighted the battle footage again. "Every alien fleet, we have seen fights the same way. Big ships, heavy weapons, formal battle formations. It is what has worked for them for thousands of years, so they keep doing it even when it stops working." "And," President Cross prompted, "human military doctrine has always been different. We learned early that we would usually be outgunned, so we developed tactics based on speed, surprise, and adaptation. We learned to change our approach in the middle of a battle." Admiral Wright nodded slowly. "Asymmetric warfare. Use our weaknesses as strengths." "Exactly. The aliens see our small ships and simple weapons as signs of primitiveness. But small ships are harder to hit and faster to change direction. Simple weapons can be modified quickly when complex ones cannot. Dr. Parker pulled up historical data on his screen. Human military history is full of examples where inferior forces defeated superior ones through unconventional tactics. The question is whether those lessons apply to space warfare. President Cross made her decision. We are about to find out. General Collins, I am giving you complete authority to develop new defensive strategies. Admiral Wright, start modifying our fleet using any methods you think might work. Dr. Parker, I want you to analyze every second of the alien battles to find weaknesses in the Void Swarm. She paused and looked at Jake Morrison on the screen. Captain, I want you to start gathering volunteers for the most dangerous mission in human history. What mission is that, Madam President? We are going to do something no alien species was willing to try. We are going to attack the Void Swarm before it attacks us. And we are going to do it using tactics so unconventional that even we do not know if they will work. The meeting ended with everyone heading off to begin preparations for a type of warfare that had never been tried in space. As the room emptied, President Cross stood alone looking at the star charts showing the Void Swarm's approach. In 6 weeks, humanity would either prove that youth and adaptability could triumph over ancient power, or they would join the long list of species that had been consumed by something beyond their understanding. But unlike the aliens who had dismissed them, humans were not going to face extinction using tactics that were already proven to fail. The transformation began in the orbital shipyards above Earth, where Chief Engineer Maria Santos stood looking at blueprints that would have made alien naval architects laugh even harder than they had at the Galactic Council meeting. Instead of designing massive dreadnoughts like the ones that had just been destroyed, she was creating something that looked more like racing boats than warships. Forget everything the aliens taught us about space combat, Maria told her engineering teams as they gathered around the holographic displays. We are going back to human basics. Think about pirates, not battleships. Think about hit-and-run attacks, not formal battles. The new ships were called Harrier-class vessels, and they broke every rule of alien ship design. They were small enough to be built in days instead of years, fast enough to outrun anything the galaxy had ever seen, and most importantly, they could be modified completely in just a few hours. While Maria worked on the ships, Director Chris Martinez received the strangest orders of his career at the Asteroid Belt Mining Consortium. Admiral Wright appeared on his communication screen with a request that sounded like science fiction even by human standards. You want us to turn mining equipment into weapons? Chris asked, looking confused. Not weapons exactly, Admiral Wright replied. Tools. Your mass drivers can throw asteroids across the solar system. Your plasma cutters can slice through solid rock like butter. Your gravity manipulators can change how objects move through space. We need to think beyond normal weapons. The breakthrough came from the most unexpected source possible. Emma Rodriguez was 8 years old and lived on the colony world of Kepler 442b with her parents. During a routine evacuation drill at her school, she raised her hand and asked her teacher a simple question. Why do we not just hide and hit the bad guys when they are not looking? The teacher smiled and gave the kind of answer adults give children when they ask obvious questions. But Emma's mother, Lieutenant Commander Sofia Rodriguez, was listening to the drill on her communication device from her office at the Colony Defense Center. The innocent question from her daughter sparked an idea that would change everything. Within hours, Sofia had sent the suggestion up through military channels, and within a day it reached Colonel Danny Murphy at Earth Defense Command. Murphy was a specialist in what the military called asymmetric warfare, which was a fancy way of saying fighting dirty when you had to. This 8-year-old girl has figured out what alien military planners with million-year-old brains could not, Murphy announced to the combined defense staff. The key to fighting the Void Swarm is not to fight it the way everyone expects. He brought up historical examples on the main screen in the briefing room. Every successful human military campaign has used the same basic principle. When you are outgunned, you do not line up and trade shots with the enemy. You hide, you strike when they are not ready, and you make them adapt to you instead of adapting to them. Dr. Parker, now serving as the chief strategic advisor, added the crucial insight that tied everything together. Human armies have always had to be faster at making decisions because we knew we would usually be facing bigger and stronger enemies. We learned to think quickly, move quickly, and change our plans quickly. The strategy that emerged was so simple that it seemed almost silly, but it was based on thousands of years of human military experience. Instead of meeting the Void Swarm in direct battle like the aliens had done, humanity would use what historians would later call the mosquito strategy. Like mosquitoes attacking a much larger animal, human forces would make small, quick strikes, designed to confuse and irritate the enemy rather than destroy it in one massive battle. The goal was not to win through superior firepower, but to force the Void Swarm to waste energy, adapting to attacks that kept changing. Captain Jake Morrison volunteered his ship, the UES Defiance, for the first test of the new strategy. His vessel had been completely rebuilt using Maria Santos's new design principles. It now carried mining drills instead of traditional weapons, gravity nets instead of missiles, and a crew trained to change tactics every few minutes during battle. Lisa Carter, promoted to tactical coordinator, spent her days studying the footage from alien defeats and looking for patterns in how the void creatures adapted. They learned fast, she told Jake as they prepared for their first mission. But they seemed to learn in a specific order. Physical defenses first, then energy resistance, then behavioral changes. Ryan Phillips, now serving as the adaptive warfare specialist, had developed what he called the Chaos Protocol. "We are going to attack them with 7 different methods in the first 10 minutes, he explained. By the time they adapt to method number 1, we will already be using method number 4. The target for the first test was a small group of Void Scouts approaching the mining colony on Titan 7. Intelligence reports suggested there were only 5 enemy vessels, but even these small ships had adaptive capabilities that had proven too much for alien forces to handle. Jake stood on the bridge of his ship as they approached the test area, looking at his crew of volunteers who had signed up for what everyone knew was probably a suicide mission. "Remember," he told them, "we are not trying to prove we are better than the aliens. We are just trying to prove we are different enough to survive." The attack plan was unlike anything that had ever been attempted in space warfare. Instead of approaching in formation like proper warships, the human vessels would drift in like space debris, hiding among the asteroids and wreckage that littered this part of space. Maria Santos had equipped each ship with experimental cloaking, technology that did not make them invisible, but made them look like dead hulks floating in space. The void creatures, evolved to detect the energy signatures of active alien warships, would hopefully ignore what appeared to be harmless debris. Lieutenant Amy Foster, piloting the UES Hornet, would make the first attack using a tactic that no military academy in the galaxy had ever taught. She would ram her ship directly into the enemy using her mining drill as a weapon, but instead of trying to destroy the void vessel, she would plant an explosive device and then escape before it went off. The explosion would not be large enough to kill the creature ship, but it would force it to begin adapting to a type of attack it had never encountered before. More importantly, it would start a process that the human forces could control and manipulate. As the small human fleet drifted toward their target, Jake felt a mixture of fear and excitement. In a few hours, they would either prove that human creativity could overcome alien superiority, or they would become another footnote in the long list of species consumed by the Void Swarm. But unlike the aliens who had dismissed humanity's offer of help, the humans were not going into battle with tactics that were thousands of years old. They were making up their strategy as they went along, trusting in their ability to adapt faster than their enemy could learn. The test was about to begin, and with it, humanity's first real chance to show the galaxy that sometimes being young and inexperienced was exactly what the situation required. In the distance, the Void Scouts continued their approach, completely unaware that they were about to encounter something that would challenge everything they had learned about warfare, from consuming dozens of ancient civilizations. The battle of Titan 7 was about to begin, and it would be unlike any battle the galaxy had ever seen.